And welcome to Ask Dr. Bogus here, brought to you by the Real Outdoors in Emerald Isle. Good morning, Doc.
Good morning, Ben.
Good to have you with us here today as we take a look at what's been some rainy and windy weather out there, but must be tough for fishing.
Well, it was noisy last night for sure. I got just over an inch of rain last night. And speaking of rain, I wanted to promote something here this morning. No, I'm not running for president. But what I'd like to promote is the CoCoRaHS, the Community Collaborative Rain, Hail, and Snow Network, this morning, and it's a network run through NOAA, and I have a rain gauge that I submit data to every day to NOAA. And this March is their March Madness. They're going to try to sign up another couple hundred or up to 250 new members for North Carolina. This is their recruitment month in March every year, and I've been doing this. Actually, it's my since March of 2012. I've been submitting daily data. I was looking. I have thousands of data points now that I've submitted, and it really gives an idea. We have, I don't know, last time I looked, 8,000 or 9,000 people across the country, and now getting into Canada and whatnot. But if you're interested in doing this, you can either get in touch with me. I can get you in touch with David Glenn, who's at NOAA up in Newport here, or just CoCoRaHS.org. And they're always looking for people to do this. The fact that I'd done several thousand of these, I looked back in my notes to see on my Excel spreadsheets to see how many data points I'd taken for water temperatures. Well, since 1999, if you count both the ocean and the surf, about 14,000.
Yes, that's a lot. And now, but you're submitting in this a really wonderful citizen science project. This is just water gauge, or are you doing water temps too?
No, I'd send that my water temperatures to NOAA up in Newport to David Glenn every morning as well. They appreciate that data. Actually, I started sending that a number of years ago, now 7 or 8 years ago, when I talked to David on Bogue Pier. I bumped into him out there, and he recognized me. And so we set up a little collaboration. So I send him the data, the water temperature data, and and post my rain data every day. And if you want to see what the rain from yesterday was, if you could go to CoCoRaHS.org, there's a map of the U.S., and you can click on the state or your region and see what the local distribution. It's a really useful thing. Not only just to get an idea what the locality of the rain is, because we know that it's quite variable at times. But this kind of data feeds into mosquito control and runoff and closing of shellfish areas to protect us from bacterial infections, that sort of stuff. So it feeds into a lot of stuff. It's not just collecting data for the sake of collecting data. And it's monitored pretty closely. I know one of the days I had a number that looked out of line. It just happened that I had a cloud over my house that had a rain burst, where everybody else got 0.3 inches. I got 3 inches of rain, and they figured I put the decimal point in the wrong place, which I hadn't, by the way. But so if you want to get in touch with them, and they're looking for volunteers, it's a community based, and like I said, I don't know, there's maybe 8,000 or 9,000 or 10,000 people that are involved with this so far around the country and into Canada and other areas so far. So CoCoRaHS.org, and if you forget that, you can always get in touch with me. I'll give you some information on that, and where you can get in touch with David Glenn or the people at NOAA and get set up for that.
Meanwhile,
it's a great volunteer thing to do.
Well, meanwhile, how's the fishing?
How's the fishing? Well, first of all, they're making progress on Bogue Pier. they're making also. I noticed the other day they're making progress on fixing some of the water accesses in Emerald Isle. I noticed that the eastern access, at least they tore down the old broken stuff, and hopefully we'll get that up in the next couple of weeks. The other thing about access, of course, whatever the bridge is named, the new bridge over the Oregon Inlet is now open to automobile traffic, to car traffic. So we're not sure what the name is going to be. There's some debate, I guess, on that. And one of the things that is picking up, it has been actually quite good, is the Neuse River bite of stripers. That has been really a good. All winter long, actually, for during last summer as well as through the winter, and you may have noticed if you subscribe to the proclamations and notes from Marine Fisheries that they're getting ready to close down a bunch of the striper fishing. It's in the central and southern management area where there will be no legal stripers allowed to be taken. Now, this is for either both commercial and recreational, and it encompasses the area of the internal waters from south of Oregon Inlet down to the South Carolina line. So the Neuse, Tar River, White Oak Rivers, all those places will be totally shut down. And the reason for this is that the striper fishing has been very good, but almost all those fish are hatchery raised fish and released into the Neuse River, and that are being caught now. And they've noticed that there has been some natural spawning activity. So what they would like to do is to close down the fishery in that area to try to see if they can get a natural resurgence of the stripers in those areas. This does not affect the Roanoke River, which is north of that, of this area that they're closing down, and which is open for striper fishing since I think March 1st. I think that opens up for striper fishing, although they're not there quite yet. It's mostly a shad fishery during March, but that's going to shut that down, and I don't know when. I've looked to see exactly when it was. The only thing that I have is, when they finally close it down, there will be no possession limits for it. But we should be getting a note from Marine Fisheries sometime soon to see when the actual season is closed down. It'll be totally closed down for the entire year, presumably, and until where they can get hopefully a stable population that doesn't have to be a hatchery raised fish.
Anything meanwhile, anything else being caught in the surf or back up in the creeks?
Well, back up in the creeks, there are still decent red drum and trout bites. In the surf, there are. We mentioned that there were sea mullet around Beaufort Inlet, and actually I saw somebody with a picture posted the other day of blowfish. So the blowfish are either, I don't know if they're still around or if they've come back. The way the season was this year, it's a little hard to tell, but there are probably an early start to both the sea mullet and the blowfish at this point. So that'll be interesting. There's still a good bite of drum redfish around the Cape Lookout, around those eastern beaches of the Core Banks, and so that's probably what's mostly going on. I did notice this morning, much to my total dismay, that as I passed by Schoolhouse Creek, they've extended the no parking area. I think all it was up to that lighting fixture place now along Highway 24.
Oh, wow. Okay.
So I don't know. Unless I can find maybe I'll get a Uber or somebody to drop me off at Schoolhouse Creek now.
Otherwise, it's going to be kind of off limits. I think.
Yeah, off limits, or I didn't look at. I didn't look on the north side of the road there to see what. But I'm assuming they have probably extended it there to make sure that either bust in or parachute in there. You can't fish along Schoolhouse Creek, which is
More to
sad.
come in a moment with Dr. Bogus. we're back with Dr. Bogus here on the Talk Station. If you'd like to ask a question, 247-7282. If you'd like to join us to ask a question of Dr. Bogus. And Doc, I know it's we're getting to springtime now. We're in meteorological spring, I guess, but all your data points coming together and pointing towards another spring. So what do we have to talk about here?
Yeah, we know that the water temperature, I mentioned I've taken like 14,000 or more data points. That's since 1999. That didn't even include my 95 to 99 data. And what we know is that, why do I do that? It's water temperatures mean who, when, you know. It really is the determining factor. If you go to the website at coif.com, you can look at the tables I have there for the temperatures that different sorts of fish are tolerant of, which describes really their comings and goings during the spring, and then obviously the goings back in the fall and the winter. And one of the things we can look at is this year compared to just about a year ago. We know that all my data points, I have my curves right in front of me here, have all the ones from last year were below my normal curve for this 20 some odd years of data here. And this year, all the data points have been at or above normal, my normal curve. And what that really means is maybe this year we can get off to a nice early start for the fishing. I mentioned that we've already seen sea mullet start to show up, which they're fairly cold tolerant, and also the blowfish, which is another fish that will come in early. Both actually croakers, sea mullet, and blowfish can handle temperatures in the upper 40s. And so those are the fish that you tend to see early in the season coming up. Some of the first guys coming in early in the spring. I was on wandering the beaches the other day, and somebody was, they always ask me, what's the temperature that you look for? What's the really breakout temperature? Well, if you're starting to look for some of the other fish, I like one of the temperatures that I like to see coming up is 65 degrees, and and that brings a lot of things into play once you start hitting 65. And, when do you think that'll happen? Well, normally that does not happen until we get sort of the overnight temperatures in the 60s. Otherwise, the temperatures, the warming of the day is offset by the cooling of the night, unless we get the warm, enough temperatures into the 60s that at night that we can slowly boost those temperatures up. I have a table that I set up looking for each month. Obviously, January, the beginning of the month, we start off in the 50s and get down to around 48, 49 degrees. It's still a month where since September, October, November, December, and in January, we're getting decreases in water temperatures. By February, although February can be the coldest of the temperatures that we get, what we see is by the end of the month, there's usually a slight rise, which is what we saw this year. We saw the temperatures start off at around 50 degrees or so the beginning of February, and by the end they're up into the mid 50s. We're up to we've been hovering right around 53 to 55 for most of the last couple of weeks, anyways, in February. By March, we finally see some real increases. The months that really see the biggest increases are like March, April, and May.
Right.
Where we see March, we start off in the low 50s and we get up close to 60 degrees. April, 60 to 65. May, we see that 65, 66, which things really start to break out, get into the 70s. And so that's sort of how our spring usually goes. And by June, we're up solidly into the 70s. We see months like March and like May, we can see an increase from the beginning to the end of the month of 7 or 8 degrees, and that makes a big difference. One of the fish that we see that I wait for, since I'm an artificial kind of guy,
right?
Metal plastic sometimes would. One of the fish that I like to see starting to come in are the bluefish. because I can catch them with cast masters or various sorts of artificial baits. It's interesting. Their early season feeding habits are maybe slightly different. We don't see things like anchovies and stuff around, but what we do see in the springtime are worm hatches. And I noticed a number of years ago when I was using soft plastic baits that were kind of brownish or root beer color, that was a really good bait for catching the bluefish that time of year. And really, if you have nice fresh bluefish in the spring, it's really it's a good eating fish. I know people look down on them for their table fare, but partly that's operator error.
Yeah, well, but it's also you point to something that you've said for a long time about matching the hatch with your bait. So if you're looking at some of those artificials, you want them to kind of resemble those worms, I guess.
Yeah, especially when we're this time of year, you're getting a lot of fish that tend to be fairly hungry, and there are small baits coming in, and it's really good to use smallish baits. Right now we see, although we don't have those anchovies like we had in the fall, but we know that there are a lot of, in the wintertime, there are a lot of fish that go offshore into the ocean, from the sounds into the ocean, to spawn in the in the wintertime. And they come back, and how they find the inlets again, I don't know. But they do. They come back in. And so some of those fish are finger mullet, some of the striped mullet or / jumping mullet, things like croakers, things like spots start to come back in. And so you're using very small baits. Actually, late winter, which is what we're in now, frequently when I had fished at places like Broad Creek or Gales Creek, I often would use crappie jigs for baits for catching speckled trout, because there are a lot of very small fish around. If you go over the Emerald Isle Bridge or the Causeway, Atlantic Beach Causeway this time of year, and you see gulls, not terns so much, but gulls diving, hanging, fluttering right above the water. They're feeding on that late winter or midwinter spawn that has just come in, the larval or just small fry fish that have come in under those conditions. So that's the kind of fish that you're trying to match the hatch of this time of year. And you can catch, I've caught 3, 4, 5 pound speckled trout on a little tiny crappie jig. The only thing I'm worried about that is the hooks are very small, and if you don't get it hooked in a good spot, it's hard to land a fish like that. But if you get it hooked in the roof of the mouth somewhere, then you can fight them pretty well. But those are really tiny jigs, and I use like a chartreuse little curly tail that's probably only maybe an inch long on them, with a 1/8 or 16th inch ounce jig head on them. So, those are the kind of baits you're trying to match.
You mentioned about those again with bluefish. What about for spot? Because that seems to be the one that draws a lot of people to the piers.
Yeah, they spawn in the wintertime and they come in. It's interesting. I was reading an article just recently about spots, and we know that the spot fishing has been down the last number of years. In my recent memory, they do a variety of surveys on these fish. Of course, they measure the catch, both the harvest, that is both recreational and commercial, which is down lately. But they have methods of determining what the abundance of the fish are, how many fish are out there. And there's a mismatch right now, either because the data isn't any good or because there's something weird going on as far as the abundance goes, where there's a mismatch between they're seeing larger numbers of spot as far as the abundance of the spot go, but the numbers of fish are down. And there can be a number of reasons, why that happens. But it's the article that I read about that doesn't really, they talk about spawning and success for year 1 or 2, or there are fish that are a very short life fish, and they can live up to 5 or 6 years, but most of them are 1 or 2 years old, and so it's a fishery that can be really affected by just a an event could, maybe like Florence, for example, could have.
All right. We'll have more to come with Dr. Bogus in just a moment. Dr. Bogus with us here on the Talk Station, FM 107 and AM 1240. And Doc, you mentioned about spots and blues, but the other target fish that a lot of people come to the ocean for is flounder. So what about that?
Yeah, the flounder tend to be they've went offshore like some of the other fish. They have gone offshore to spawn in the wintertime and start to return. Both the summer flounder and the southern flounder, and also the Gulf flounder. And you find them, first of all, at the reefs, the nearshore reefs, 315, 320, or the ones out of Bogue Inlet, or on the ledges that are just offshore. So those are the ones you normally see. They can handle pretty chilly water, and of course some of them overwinter in the Sound as well. The other things that we see this time of year, an abundance, if you go pier fishing, for example, or along the beach, a lot of sharks and skates. There was that come in this time of year. There was a debate, somebody calling, saying those gray sharks, those small sharks you catch on the pier, they're sand sharks. Well, there is no fish called a sand shark. There are sand tigers and sandbar sharks, but people lump that term sand shark into any small shark that they don't know what it is. It's just sort of a collective noun for a bunch of small gray sharks. One of the fish sharks that we do see a lot of this time of year are the dogfish. Often the spiny dogfish. Why are they called spiny dogfish? They have a couple of nasty spines. So it's right behind their dorsal fins there, and you got to watch out when they're slopping around on the pier or something. And actually, I think was it Seaview Pier, one of the piers down on Topsail, they have a dogfish tournament during this time of year. So, what are the other kinds of things that we tend to see? Black drum. They're a cold water fish. They, in fact, along with the red drum and the Sound, you can catch them year round. So, and you find them in the beach this time of year. Now we see also the things like false albacore coming in, and of the past few years, we've seen the blackfin tuna caught from the piers and along the reefs and areas. That has been an interesting change. I don't remember that from years past. But we've seen that the last several years, where one year there was one, then last few years there's several of them being caught right from the piers and also the nearshore reefs.
All right, and if you want to check in on any of the data points that Dr. Bogus was talking about, you can look him up at ncoif.com, find him on his Facebook page too, and join us again for Ask Dr. Bogus, brought to you by the Real Outdoors in Emerald Isle. We'll see you next week, Doc.
See you next Monday, Ben.